The Vitus Escarpe is a 29-inch mid-travel bike with 140mm of rear travel and 150mm of front travel, a carbon fiber front triangle, and an aluminum rear triangle. This particular build retails for $2,699 US or $29.99 in euros, and that comes with the Pike fork, nice set of DT Swiss wheels, Shimano SLX brakes and drivetrain, making this particular build a really good deal for a bike that's not really going to need any upgrades anytime soon. There are two other builds. There's one less expensive build and one kind of top build with Kashima and all the sparkly parts, and you can also get a frame and a Fox DPS factory shock for $1,999 US, which would be a really cool place to start a build for your new mid-travel bike like this. On the geometry table, the Escarpe kind of has the angles that you would expect with a bike like this. So this size medium has a 65-degree head tube angle, nice kind of average 77-degree seat tube angle, and then below that it's got a nice deep 35mm of bottom bracket drop. And in length numbers it has 440mm chainstays, which fit really nicely with the 451mm reach on the medium. The only geometry related sort of challenge I found with this bike was that the steer tube was cut pretty short from the factory, so I wasn't able to get the bars as high as I would like, but that's easily changed by swapping out the bar. There is a geometry flip chip on the Escarpe that changes the head tube angle by ½ degree and raises or lowers the bottom bracket by 6mm, and given the kind of average geometry numbers of the bike, I just left it in low for the whole test. But it's kind of cool to have that versatility for folks that want to ride in a wider range of trails. On the build spec, the only thing I would change out other than a higher rise handlebar would be to give the bike a longer dropper. So this medium came with a 150mm dropper, which is certainly sufficient, but when you've been riding 170 to 180mm droppers for quite a while, that starts to feel like a high post. While pedaling and climbing, the Escarpe feels like a really nice, efficient bike. I very rarely had to flip the compression switch closed to keep the rear end smooth, even climbing up pavement to the trailhead. The rear end has plenty of support, and I just didn't need to flip that switch and have one more thing to remember once I got to the top. It was working just fine open. And while that means there's very little pedal bob in this bike, it still does stay plenty active while you're climbing, and the seat tube angle is steep enough that it's a fun bike to climb through any rock garden or root ball you're trying to work through. All that support also transfers into the way the bike sprints. It's got a really nice platform to push against, and that's true on the way downhill as well. When you're pressing the rear tire into a hard compression or trying to pump, you get a lot back from this bike. It has a really nice rabbit character and kind of gives back every bit as much as you put into it. And unlike some of the other bikes in this test, the Escarpe is not a bike I would buy or recommend for somebody who wants to have a mid-travel bike that they can race enduro on, as it does start to feel a little anxious and almost too poppy at really high speed in rougher trails. And it seems much more designed for someone who wants to play around, jump off things, and have a good time, and is less concerned about getting to the bottom of the trail first. And that's not to say that you couldn't race a local enduro on this bike, just that Vitus has other bikes that will work better for that. The RockShox Select Plus shock and Pike fork felt really well balanced for this platform, and given what the bike is designed to do, I don't think it needs any more suspension or any like higher end suspension. There's plenty of pop and play and support in what it's got. You will find the end of that suspension and it gets pretty rough, and that's where I would say, like, yeah, this bike it's not for racing enduro, it's not for plowing through the roughest stuff you can find. It's more of an all-mountain play bike if we have to cram it in a box. The Escarpe is also one of the few bikes that's come with a 4-piston front brake caliper and a 2-piston rear, and based on the rest of the build and how this bike wants to be handled and treated out on the trail, I think it's plenty of power. I was surprised. I normally wouldn't think that, but it worked out really well, and I never found myself thinking that I needed another 4-piston caliper. I might end up putting one on there in the future if this were my personal bike, but I don't think it needs it. So to sum up the Escarpe, it's a fantastic deal for what you get. If you want a bike that is playful and a good time on almost any trail for a really good price, that it is a nice build. It's going to hold up for quite a while. This is one that's absolutely worth taking a close look at. For additional information on the Escarpe, as well as other news and reviews, head over to singletracks.com.